All right, Lokati here. We are making our build guide for our bleed-based Werebear. This is a very tanky, medium DPS, easy to play, kind of beginner to in-game guide. We're going to start off with our empowered monoliths. We're level 80 right now, so we are just starting out on our monoliths. So our gear is far from perfect. We don't have nearly as many passives as we would like. Um, but our resistances are okay, our armor is okay, and we'll see kind of how everything goes here. So build is pretty straightforward. You're just going to be spamming swipe for damage. I'm leaving our screen open right here so you can see how the stats adjust as you're fighting stuff. You can see armor will go up and dodge will go up as we're fighting stuff because we have passive skills that are going to be proccing and increasing those stats. You'll see whenever we're fighting, our dodge will get up to about 40%. In game, we're going to be hitting 75 to 80%, and our armor will also go up as we are fighting things. So right now the density is kind of low, so our stats aren't moving that much. But you'll see as we start fighting more things, stats will continue to go up and up. The dodge we're getting from stacks of Maelstrom and increased percentage dodge implicits or explicits on our gear. And the armor we're getting from Thorn Shield procs that happen 1 out of every 10 hits. So obviously the more things that are hitting us, or the more times we're getting hit, the more armor that we're going to get. Survivability on this build is solid. It is incredibly tanky. We'll be able to stand inside this beam right here with very minimal issues, and you can see our life does not move at all once we get under our endurance threshold. In game, our endurance threshold is going to be much higher, so it won't look quite so sketchy. We'll be running about 1300 on the endurance threshold in end game, but right now we're still, again, low on gear, low on skill points, and all that will come with time. Our healing is primarily coming from Warcry healing, as well as on-hit healing, and physical damage leech, or bleeds leech, as well as on kill healing. So we have a lot of different sources of healing, a lot of different burst healing as well. So it's easy to get us topped up in the middle of combat, and we also have really solid sustain while we're in combat. Mobility on this build is really good. The charge gives us a ton of mobility, and so we're very, very quick running around maps. The maul ability from the druid, we're not going to use at all because it is a very slow, short traversal skill. Doesn't do a lot of damage, and our swipe has incredible attack speed, so we would much rather use our swipe as we're moving around rather than doing this little maul. We get 1 maul for like 7 or 8 swipes. Moving around, we're over 100% move speed with our rampage ability, and so that lets us get around the map very quickly. Small creatures that we see when we're running around are very easily killed by our rampage because our rampage applies our bleeds, and our bleeds are our #1 source of damage. Whenever we're fighting out here and you're wanting to move through a map quickly, anything that is not a large enemy or a rare enemy can be killed with 1 or 2 swipes. And so whenever you're fighting large enemies, you'll need to get them to about 50% health off of the swipes, and then they'll just die. Like these bears right here, we get them down to about 50, and then we just walk away and they'll die. Smaller guys like these, you can hit them 1 time. They're going to melt away as you walk away from them. So if you're just moving through the map very quickly and you want to make sure you get that XP, you can just hit these guys once or twice, and then they'll die as you walk away. Anything big, like I said, get it to about 50% health, and then you can walk away. The bleeds will kill it once it's down to about 50% health. The only exception to that are going to be bosses, end of monolith targets, and anything super, super tanky. But 95% of the stuff you're fighting, you can hit it once if it's weak, and you can get it to 50% health if it's strong, and then you can walk away, and it'll just die as it chases you down. Now this monolith is complete, so we'll get out of this monolith, and then we will go and we will take a look at our build guide that we have set up here. All right, so this is our build guide. We've already got it all set up for you. These are all of your in-game goals. Um, Health, we're going to be sitting between 2K and 4K, depending on gear. This one is set at 3K right now before transformation, so about 3,600 health in Werebear form. Um, Health is not as important to us as it is to some other classes because we have a tremendous amount of layers of mitigation. And really, as long as we are at a decent endurance threshold, you're going to take almost no damage under the endurance threshold relative to what your regen is capable of, including standing in almost every monolith boss, including T4 Jolra. Now, our endurance threshold is going to be capped while we're in bear form. It's at 50% because the build guide doesn't show you the additional endurance threshold that you're getting from bear form. And then our dodge on this one is set at 70% plus 38% plus 57%. And so with our maelstrom stacks, this dodge is going to be close to 75% dodge rate. Again, our armor is set at 1500 base. This will get up to 4 to 5K, which is 50 to 60% damage reduction from armor. And so we're going to get a ton of armor and a ton of dodge while running around, which all stacks with our other layers of mitigation. Now, on our passives, our next major layer of mitigation comes from Aspect of the Boar. We get 15% from Boar Heart, another 15% from Porcine Constitution, and those are scaled up with our adorned idols, which are all giving us between 5 and 11% increased Aspect of the Boar effect. So you got 40% increased effect from these idols, which stack on this 30%, giving us about 42% flat damage reduction while we're in Aspect of the Boar, which with Boar Heart is all of the time. We're always hitting things. It's got a 4-second duration. 20% chance you're just going to be an Aspect of the Boar 100% of the time. So it's a 42% flat damage reduction that layers onto the dodge, layers onto the armor, which layers onto the endurance. Now we also take Deep Wounds and Tusk Warrior because this is increased physical damage as well as bleed chance and bleed penetration. These both scale with a 40% effect. So we're at 160% bleed penetration and 58% fizz damage, 58% bleed chance granted. So a lot of good scaling here from those idols. And a lot of really strong defensive layers here. We also take Ursine Strength, which is another 16% reduced damage taken from nearby enemies. Now we'll go through the passives real quick. We've got Strength here for increased armor and health regeneration. Gift of the Wilderness for health. We do take Harmony of Blaze because we are dual wielding. And we take Hunter's Restoration for the 10% increased health. The Strength right here is not necessary. It does not scale our damage. It only scales our defenses. If you need more health because you're not finding health items, you can pull these points out of here. Go 1 here and 5 over here, 6 over here for increased health right there. Next, we go over to our Beast Mastery tree. Again, we're taking Ursine Strength and all of the nodes for Aspect of the Boar. Under Druid, we're taking a couple of points in here at the very end just for some additional health. Primarily, we're taking Chitinous Plating, which gives armor and endurance percentage. We're taking Thicket of the Thorns, which is a requirement to get the increased armor and to get our cast Thorn Shield on you when hit. We're taking Claws of the Forest for increased fizz damage. We're taking Nightshade Fangs for bleed chance. We're taking Focused Wrath for damage while transformed and reduced rage decay and no rage out of combat. We're taking Fetid Resilience for increased damage over time while transformed. And then we're finishing it off with Impervious for 20% less damage per hit and Hide Skin for increased health and maximum health gain as endurance threshold. Again, if you're feeling low on health, you can take points out of Impervious, move them over to Hide Skin. This one right here is really good for bosses, not so good for monolith farming. So if you're not doing a lot of bossing or dungeon killing, we can take these points out of here and move them over here. And then when you get to a boss, very cheap gold, just pull these 5 points here, move them back down here specifically for the boss fight. For our skills, we are obviously in Werebear form. Bleed chance is important to us here. Rage decay rate is important to us here. And then Ursine Storm for Maelstroms on hit here, and Swipe for maintaining our rage. We are 23 points into Werebear form because we're taking improved or levels of Werebear on our helm and our belt, which gives us plus physical, which is our Werebear form here. Swipe, we're going down to physical shred and max bleed chance, and then all the way over here for global crit multiplier, and getting all of our stacks for aspect of the Panther and Lion strength here just for more stacks. So that we're at 7 stacks for our crit multiplier. We don't crit, but Salt the Wound does give us scaling for our global crit multiplier. So this is a huge amount of physical penetration on our bleeds from Salt the Wound. And then 7 stacks of aspect of the Panther here give us global damage, which increases our bleed damage. We also like Feline Hunter for global attack speed. We are taking Maelstrom, going down and make maximum stack duration, maximum mana efficiency with Haste and Frenzy while we're at 6 or more stacks, which is all of the time. And then we're getting our dodge rating per stack of Maelstrom. We're averaging 10 to 20 stacks of Maelstrom, which is 360 to 620 stack or dodge rating for these Maelstrom stacks. Now that is being modified by all of our percentage dodge, which is about 150% percentage dodge, which is giving us between 800 and 2000 dodge, which is where we're getting a huge amount of dodge rating from. Maelstrom here gives us 5% global increased physical damage per Maelstrom stack, which again scales our bleed damage. Anything physical or global increases our bleed damage. So this is a huge bonus damage to our bleeds for having Maelstrom stacks up. We're also taking Power of the Storm, Energized, and Strong Tides. This is just to get more Storm Bolts out. We don't care anything about the damage of Stormbolt, but Stormbolt can bleed. And so we have probably a base 200 to 300% bleed chance, which means 2 to 3 stacks of bleeds every time Stormbolt hits something, and it's hitting 4 targets, which massively helps with our AoE clear. The Stormbolts have a really good range on them too, so it'll tag and kill low health archers that are kind of out of the range while you're clearing out melee things as well. We are taking Warcry. Warcry's primary purpose is to gain Berserk, which is a buff that reduces damage you take and gives you increased attack speed. We're increasing that Berserk duration, adding stacks to it, and getting our attack speed here from those stacks of the Berserk ability. Now, we don't need 5 maximum stacks because our attack speed is going to cap out. You could take 2 points out of here and move them over to Breath of Terra if you needed additional healing. You could take 2 points out of here and move it over to Eviscerating Howl if you needed more AoE bleeds. I leave 5 points in here because the Berserk duration gives you a little bit better quality of life while you're running from pack to pack. Over here we move to Breath of Terra, and we take Whirlpool, which gives us Maelstrom stacks on use. This just every time we hit Warcry, we get Maelstrom, we're going to hit Warcry on cooldown. This is going to be a high rate of Maelstrom activity for us. And then we move over here and take Kinetic Scream. So our Warcry hits. Since our Warcry hits, it applies bleeds based on our global bleed chance. And then we also apply bleeds with our Warcry now. And we have a reduced cooldown so we can Warcry more often. You lose the stun, doesn't matter. We don't care about the stun. We want a shorter cooldown for more Maelstrom, more bleeds, and more bleeds. Spriggan form, we're not ever going to be in Spriggan form, but this allows us to scale our Thorn Shield. Again, every time we're hit, there's a 10% chance we're going to cast Thorn Shield. We get hit a lot because we're in melee. More Thorn Shields, more armor, more increased armor with Thorn Shield. And when Thorn Shield bursts, we get a Thorn Burst bleed chance. And so we have our base global bleed chance and then additional bleed chance from our Thorn Shield bursting. And so if we're hit 100 times, we get 10 Thorn Shields. That's 10 Thorn Bursts, which is 10 times the number of bleeds and additional bleed chance, additional area on that burst, and a 30% chance that every time a Thorn Shield expires, it recasts itself. So 100 hits instead of being 10 thorn shields on average becomes 14 thorn shields on average because it can recast, and then the recast has a chance to recast. And so this just translates to a lot of additional bleeds, a lot of additional armor, and a lot of additional survivability. We also take the increased duration on Thorn Shield and the additional Thorn Shield duration down here. This is just because the burst is nice, but really our primary purpose of this is the increased armor, so we want a longer duration on this. So these are our skills that we're going to be using, but we're only going to be hitting Flight and Warcry. Now, while we're in Werebear form, it replaces all of our skills down here with new skills. And so Swipe scales off of your Swipe skill tree. Roar scales off of our Warcry skill tree. Rampage, again, is going to be our primary movement ability. Allows us to move around the map very quickly. And then Maul is something we're just never going to hit. I went ahead and moved spells around. This is so you can revert back to human form. There's not really any reason to do that. But if you needed to revert back to human form for any reason, you can do that right down here. And so this is how everything on the build is going to work. Like I said, it's a pretty straightforward build. Very good for hardcore, very good for solo play. The gearing is very straightforward. Does not require uniques, but the uniques give us a lot of scaling and a lot of survivability. On our helm, an ideal piece is going to be Ancestral Crown with level of Werebear, increased damage over time while transformed, crit strike avoidance, and increased health. You could use, instead of Ancestral Crown, you can instead use the Ice Wolf Pelt if you're low on resists, or Dark Wolf Pelt if you're low on damage. But again, the maximum health gain is endurance threshold is really, really good on this Ancestral Crown. But it is a level 86 base item requirement. So you'll be using a Dark Wolf Pelt or an Ice Wolf Pelt until you get to that point. A Bone Amulet is like a base requirement for the build. We don't get a lot of resist from our tree, and so we're really tight on hitting our resist needs. Bone Amulet gives us physical and necrotic, and then we throw necrotic and void on it, and then damage over time and crit strike multiplier for scaling our damage. Our Ancestral Garb is going to be ideal for our body armor because it gives us increased health. Cooldown recovery is nice for the Warcry, but not necessary. If you don't have access to an Ancestral Garb or you are under level 80, instead we can come over here and take the Maruna Carapace because it has a huge amount of armor and the stun avoidance is nice. If you don't have access to this, you can always take Kolheim armor to help bolster our physical resistance, or Ice Wolf Garb to help bolster our cold resistance. We're never going to need the endurance threshold here, or the endurance, because we have a ton of endurance already. And then the other armors don't really give us any benefit here. Nagasa Scimitar is our #1 weapon choice here. I did a lot of testing on different weapon types and different weapon bases. Nagasa Scimitar is definitely going to be our ideal one. We want high rolls on damage over time. We want T7 attack speed or T7 damage over time. We want damage over time or attack speed in that second slot. If you can't find the damage over time, a physical damage also works. It just doesn't get as high a percentage as the damage over time does. For our suffixes, we want chance on bleed and physical pin. We would like to seal off a frailty and a chance to chill on hit. If you can't find the fizz pin, the bleed chance is a higher priority. And then you can just do frailty or chill on that second suffix until you can find one that has fizz pin. If you don't have access to Nagasa Scimitars or you can't find any, a Wangari Axe is another solid choice. It gives bleed chance and increased bleed duration. If you want increased survivability for about 60% of the damage, you can not dual wield, which reduces the damage you take by 9%. And you can use a Bardich, which is right here for the chance to bleed. You'll be running the same suffixes and prefixes on a Bardich. If you want to use a shield, you can do that for about 50% of the damage capability of the build. And you can use a Nagasa or a Wangari Axe again, and then use a shield in your offhand. Bastion is probably the best choice for shields for you because we will have 35 to 45 strength. And so this Bastion is going to give you a lot of block chance for strength for close enemies. A Cradle of the Erased with good rolls on it is another solid choice for a shield option, especially against bosses because you're hit much less frequently, and Golden Aegis stacks up. If you don't have access to either of those and you just really want a defensive shield, the best one is the Iron Glass shield. It has a very good block chance and very good block effectiveness. If you're lower level, you can run like a ship wheel, got good block chance, block effectiveness, and endurance, or an ephemeris shield here. And you can throw on any shield in your offhand. This root shield gives you endurance threshold, which is nice, but you're going to be losing a lot of damage not dual wielding. Like I said, you're going to do 100% of your damage dual wielding, 60% of it with a two-hander, 50% of it with a one-hander plus a shield. But if you're hardcore, then the shield might be a good option to go. For idols, again, we took the bleed duration and aspect of the 4 idols. If you can't find a bleed duration and aspect of the boar, stay with the aspect of the boar and whatever is on the front of this. Health on kill is okay, improved stun chance is okay, increased healing effectiveness is okay. But the most important thing is this increased aspect of the boar effect. This is probably 30% of your damage and 10 to 50% of your survivability. They're very, very important that you get boar effects. For our small idols, we're running armor and health. If you're light on resist, you can use this to cover resist. There's a lot of different options for sticking your small idols in here and finding stuff that fills in holes on your build. Over here, we are running a Thorn Slinger for the +1 physical skills and the chance on bleed. And then ideally, you'll want to slam and hybrid health and increase physical damage. Thorn Slinger is fairly easy to find additional legendary potential because it is a very low effective level of 30. Blood of the Exile, it's a little bit harder to find legendary potential on this, but you'll want to run increased dodge rating and increased hybrid health again. Salt the Wound, same thing here. It's a little higher legendary potential level, so it'll be harder to find legendary potential on this, but we just want increased health hybrid again and increased damage over time. In a Baldur's Chalice, we want endurance threshold and increased damage over time. The Baldur's Chalice is giving us bleed chance on hit, increased bleed duration, and health gained on kill, as well as physical damage over time leached as health. This is important. Blood of the Exile gives us increased bleed duration, a nice little sum of stats, which just give us small increases all around. And the physical ailment to moving enemies allows us to do significantly more damage to enemies that are chasing us down that are already bled. So as we stay mobile, this helps to bleed out things around us. And then Salt the Wound gives us just some crit strike multiplier and increased damage over time, as well as good physical and poison resist, but most importantly gives our crit strike multiplier conversion to physical penetration with bleed. And so this allows our scaling from aspect of the Panther and our crit strike multiplier from things like our amulet up here to do more physical penetration. And then our rings are just used to fill out resistances. We want gold rings for resistances. We want to increase damage over time, increase physical damage. You can be flexible with what you'd like to put on these rings here. Just use them to kind of fill out the resistances that you have. But gold rings give us the elemental resistance that we need for fire and cold. For blessings, we are taking crit strike multiplier right here for additional scaling. But if you don't get the crit strike multiplier or you need more health, you can take more health. If you need more dodge, you can take more dodge. There's a little bit of flexibility in this node right here. On this node, we're taking the lightning resist. There's nothing good that is available here. And so lightning resistance just makes it easier for us to hit all of our resistance caps. Crit strike avoidance is absolutely necessary here, as well as crit strike avoidance on an item. We have it on Helm here. Endurance threshold here is very important, but if you aren't hitting your fizz resistance, you can take fizz resistance here. If you aren't hitting your cold resistance, you can take cold resistance here. Endurance threshold just gives us a higher range of having access to 60% damage reduction from endurance. And then down here, we are taking increased dodge rating. This percent dodge is scaling very well for us. You could take flat armor here if you feel low on armor. You could take chance to apply frailty if you don't have access to frailty on one of your weapons, or you could take fire resistance here if you are needing to the additional cap for your resistances. And so that's how we're going to use our blessings over here. Now, if you have any questions on this video, please let me know. Come hit me up on Twitch. I am streaming 8 to 12 hours a day, depending on the day, and trying to stream 7 days a week. So you should be able to find me readily over there. Give me a like over there, a like here on YouTube, and a subscribe. It always helps us. And again, thank you very much for watching the video, and y'all have a wonderful day.